I thank you for the invitation to be here to give comment for Dr. Chatterjee's lecture on exobiology and the origins of life. I'm also very pleased and impressed that this is being co-sponsored by Kappa, the Honors College, and the Institute for Western Civilization. In a way, this lecture has been another of the activities that have been ongoing in this campus. I mean, it kind of an extraordinary week. I don't know how many of you were able to attend the lecture by Harry Belafonte. Anybody? It was really quite moving. It wasn't just his poetic and melodic delivery that reflects his training as an artist, but also his passion that reflected his real purpose in life as a human activist. But he made a statement that I thought was relevant to this audience. And I was commenting for Lisa Wong last night at another event. I was saying, hey, everybody who's in humanities and arts would have loved what he said. And I thought I quoted what he said, but she sent me the correct version of it today. Leave it to a historian to do that. He made a comment. Artists are the gatekeepers of truth. We are civilization's anchor. We are the compass of humanity's consciousness. And I do take some issue with that, because you could replace the word artist with certainly scientists and others. It's a characteristic that it goes across many intellectual pursuits. And then tonight, a little bit later, there's going to be an event called Lubbock Lights, where Terry and Joe Harvey Allen are going to be performing. Not to be early to go to that. And I don't know how many of you know them. Has anybody here familiar with Terry and Joe Harvey Allen? Songwriters, artists, both visual and performing. And there'll be an announcement tonight that we're in the process of trying to bring to Texas Tech some of their archival materials. They're very interested in creating what Terry Allen used to call a center for unlearning. And it's about the learning process, not just restricted to performing arts, but across all disciplines. And there was a luncheon today, and when you went there, there was on the table, they had this sheet, we were supposed to have a discussion about the creative process. And then there was a panel that addressed it, the panel of the performers. But on this piece of paper was a list of questions to guide the discussion. And one of the questions stated, it asked, is creativity important to all fields? For example, hard sciences. And I said, what a stupid question. And the person who made him up was at the table. This tonight's lecture will give you a sense of why I would respond that way. How dare you make such a statement? Creativity is inherent in all pursuits. And so you'll see this in Dr. Chatterjee's lecture. I had the chance to work with Dr. Chatterjee. He wrote one paper on dynamic model of avian kinesis. And what you'll deduce, what I learned from working with him, and what you'll deduce from listening to him, is that his life as a scientist has been about creativity, discovery, collaboration, as a gatekeeper of truth. So really, in some ways, what's the concept of exobiological research is kind of rooted in man's inquisitiveness. What's more intriguing and intrinsic to our desire to know about the origins of life on this planet and elsewhere. And finally, I would add, and this has gone on a bit long than I expected, Dr. Chatterjee brings a certain celebrity status to this event, not because of his noted work as a paleontologist and discoveries of certain dinosaurs. But about a week ago, the chair of geosciences sent me a link to a website, the Smithsonian Natural Museum of American History. And they have a website called Many Voices, One Nation. And there you'll find an image gallery. And one of these images has a collage of faces. And one of the most prominent faces among all these people is a snapshot of Dr. Chatterjee. And Jeff Lee, the chair, said, that he was merely included there because of his dashing good looks. So tonight you have the opportunity to hear from an eminent scholar and a good-looking man.
Well, I don't know if I could improve on that introduction. And I want to thank you. This is a great turnout. I want to thank you all for coming here. I was going to say that Dr. Chatterjee did what I always dreamed of doing when I was growing up. Mesozoic vertebrates, you know, those wonderful great big dinosaurs. I was a habitual visitor to the American Museum of Natural History. And you got to live the life, and you've done very well by it. But you know, it's envious. The other thing that I noted in looking at Dr. Chatterjee's Wikipedia article is that he's built with an engineer this huge model of a pterosaur, and they call it, is it called a Terra Drone? Is that right? Yeah. So it's this thing that flies around, looks, and the idea is to study the aerodynamic properties of this ancient flying reptile. And he's thoroughly tested it, but it did strike me, and I mentioned it to him, that there was another, I could think of two other uses for this now that it's been tested. One, you know, they're using drones to deliver gifts and products. So you could use this Terra Drone to deliver Halloween gifts. Kind of zoom in from out of the sky, vast. And the other would be as a kind of halftime diversion at Texas Tech Games. Be very exciting to see our own Terra Drone soaring over the opposition bleachers and putting terror in their hearts. So Dr. Chatterjee is going to do something very interesting. He's going to talk about the origins of life, but not only from the perspective of our own Earth, but from what we now are learning about other planets nearby, and maybe even more distant planets. And it's not a surprise that he is going to bring the stars into this lecture, because he's one of our great stars himself. So let me turn the floor over to Dr. Sankar Chatterjee. Thank you again.
Thank you. Maybe I'll stand in front. Thank you so much for inviting me. Now, tonight I'll be talking about the origin of life. This is probably the oldest scientific riddle, okay, since the time of Aristotle. And in every religion, you know, it starts with Genesis. In every culture, they actually, you know, define their own, you know, creation myth. Surprisingly, Darwin, the father of evolution, did not mention anything about the origin of life. But in a letter to his very good friend, Dr. Hooker, he said, perhaps life might have been formed in a sort of warm little pond. And that tells his insight, you know. And in this talk, you will see that Darwin was very close to the site where life could have been formed. Now, the very first serious questions, that means the beginning of beginning, it really started by two scientists from different countries. One, of course, Oparin from Russia and Holden from England. They said, you know, we have to ask the questions. If we do not ask, we do not know the answer. So what they suggested that, look at the primitive earth. You know, they speculated that our primitive earth contains methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and water vapor. And there is no oxygen, because oxygen was created much later by photosynthetic bacteria. And in presence of ultraviolet ray or lightning, they sort of, you know, joined together. And eventually they started concentrating in these oceans for millions of years. So the thickness, the consistency of the ocean water would be just like soup. And that's why it's called primordial soup theory. And in all textbooks, you will see these things, okay? But nobody really actually bothered whether they were right or wrong, because it's speculations. Their ideas came from, you know, looking at the Jovian planets like Saturn, Jupiter, they have the same kind of gas. These young graduate students, Stanley Miller at Chicago, he actually took the same gases and put it together and put some electric discharge, and bingo, he was able to create the amino acids, many amino acids. And the amino acids, they actually build the proteins. So suddenly there's sort of big news, in New York Times and everywhere, that yes, scientists are creating life in a test tube. And then from 50s to 80s, all over the world, people tried to create life. But it's sort of failure, Probably there's something wrong in this design of the experiment. And so this Miller type of chemical synthesis did not produce any exciting thing. On the other hand, when the astronauts went to the space and they collected samples, they found if you want to create life, they're all over the space. So perhaps the initial condition of our planet was not conducive to produce this, building block of life. And so these NASA's, exploration is the most important thing. Almost at the same time, when the chemists were trying to synthesize, life components, NASA was doing some, very fascinating thing, and they found all meteorites, whether it's a comet or asteroids, they contain actually the building blocks of life. If you want to create a cell, most of the things are there in space. So why do you reinvent the wheel? It's there. And we know that it formed at a very, very low temperature. And in the initial stage of our planet, it was just like a molten blow. And this is why the experiment failed. Our experiment was in a wrong, premise, okay? And NASA really think that by 2025, they will be able to detect some kind of alien life elsewhere. Now, if you read this week's Time magazine, there's a very, very nice article about this gentleman, Scott Sanford, he's a friend of mine. And, they are doing superb experiment just to simulate the condition in space where these, biomolecules are there. Okay? So they have a sort of super cool, lab, and there what they did, first, this is a very interesting mission, Stardust mission. They went outside, they collected all this, stardust, bring it back. They're surprised that all the building blocks of life, they're coated on the grains. So Sanford and his colleague, they actually started, doing this experiment at a very, very low temperature. You can see minus 230 degrees centigrade. Put your eyes, put little, UV radiations, and all kinds of, building blocks of lives they are able to create. That's a major, major breakthrough. And this is why, so please read this week Time magazine, there's a nice article about Sanford. So actually Sanford said that its universe is hardwired to be an organic chemist. It's not a very clean or tidy one, but it has really big beakers and plenty of time. This plenty of time, that's the thing you cannot simulate in a lab. You cannot simulate millions of years in a week or a month. Okay? And not only that, Carl Sagan almost said the same thing. He said, universe is pregnant with life. What a beautiful, So always we thought space is empty or space is full of inorganic dust. That's not true. All the organic compounds you want to see, they're there. So the starting point started, when our planet was born, long time back, about 4.6 billion years ago. Now, we take it for granted. But our planet, the blue planet, third planet, this is a wonderful planet. It is a Goldilocks planet. Look at the position. This is Sun, this is the third planet, okay? This is called the habitable zone. Not too close to the Sun, not too far away. If we switch our position from Earth to Venus, the surface temperature would be so hot, it will be molten rock. If we switch to Mars, it would be freezing like Mars. Think about, we started with this cosmic clock. It's the right size. Think about, in Mars, it's so small, it could not hold its own atmosphere. But we can do that. The size is right, distance is right. It's just like Goldilocks in a story, not too hot, not too cold, just right. So we started with this premise, and this is why our planet has this, flowing water. Without water, there is no life. Our body contains 60-70% of water, and it has to be in a liquid stage. Now you have all seen Martians. Okay, this is a very good movie. But if you look at some of the rocks of Mars, it's almost like Grand Canyon. You can see, bedded structure. There is no doubt one time there was a flowing water. Mars had rivers, oceans, all gone. Okay? So that's why it's so really tempting to go to Mars. But if you compare, Mars with our planet, you'll see it's not really a very good planet. But that's the only neighbor where we can search for life. Look at it, diameter is about half, gravity is 1/3, temperature is minus 81 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like Antarctica. And it has only 1% of this in atmosphere. There is no pressure. It cannot hold its atmosphere. Okay? And think about, although it contains all this carbon dioxide, it's still frozen. And there is no ozone layer to protect. It will be very difficult for astronauts, unless they are protected, then there will be radiations. Now look at this Mars, In the recent photographs, you see that on the 2 poles, there are ice. And Matt Damon, really landed on the wrong place. You can see the actual ice there. They don't have to do from jet fuel. Ice is there. So if they could land it, in one of these craters, there's a huge ice supply. It could last for many, many years. So these are the things, if you want to find a life, the planet should be rocky, there should be some kind of flowing water, and also there should be size. Again, our planet is the right size. Maximum, if you just increase by twice the size, it can hold. After that, it won't be any rocky planet. It would be more, gaseous. My speculation is, since it's our sister planet, now we have a very good geology of our planet. And we can compare what happened to Mars. Most likely, now this is the time called Hadean, literally means hell. All the planets, they are bombarded day and night by meteorites. Our planet was really like a molten globe. Same thing probably with Moon, Mercury, Mars. Okay? So this period, it's a long period, almost 600 million, there could not be any life. Most likely life really started, again, comparing with our planet, sometimes here. So probably this is a narrow window when Mars was living. Then it died. So in future astronauts, if they find living or fossils, they would be either like thermophiles, heat-loving bacteria. This is the oldest form of life still present. Or it could be just cyanobacteria, blue-green algae or photosynthetic bacteria. So this is what happens. Mars do not have any internal engine. Our planet is so fascinating. We have this plate tectonics all the time. We have this heat engine. We also suffered with, at least 3 or 4 times ice age. We recovered because of plate tectonics. Now let's go back. If you go to Jupiter or Saturn and look at their sky, you'll be perplexed. They have 60 moons. We can deal with 1 moon. But 60 moons on the sky, and there may be many more moons. But one of the moon is a very, very fascinating. That's Europa. It's like a snowball. Why? Two things. One, perhaps it has some plate tectonics. The crust are moving. This is a very important criterion. And second, in Europe there is oxygen. And mind you, oxygen is a typical signature of biologic activity. But it's so far, you just cannot go. But there is a very good chance that Europa may be a very good candidate for detecting life. Another one, NASA is zeroing in, this is the Saturn's moon. Saturn also have about 60 moons. But this particular one, Titan, is it's almost like science fiction. They have lakes full of methane and ethane. Temperature is freezing. And in that lake, the normal life could not live. But if there is some kind of life like silicon-based, maybe they could survive. So again, Titan is a very, very fascinating, moon where life could be there. So we have to come up with a better method, of detecting alien life. And Hollywood is doing pretty good, okay? And NASA is trying to listen, but they're so far away. Hello? It may take, few thousand years just to get the response. Now, this is NASA's Kepler mission is really very good. What they did, they went beyond the solar system. They went to this, and what they found, for example, 400 light years, these are some of the wonderful, wonderful stars, just like our planetary systems. To have life, you have to have a star, and you have to have a series of planets which are, revolving around sun or star. So these ones, especially, Kepler 442b, seems to be just like, look at the size of the Earth. So it matches the size, and probably it will be, some kind of life they are expecting, because looking from this, positions and all these things, this is a very, very, promising site. Now, just to give you, since we'll be talking about meteorites, it's a common term, but meteorites actually, really, it contains, two kinds of thing. One is the asteroids, which are rocky, and the other is comets, which is icy. Now, meteorites would play a very, very important role in the origination of life, in the destruction of life. It's almost like the Hindu god of Shiva, the god of renewal and destruction. So meteorites are real. In fact, Carl Sagan said that, comets give it and comets take it away. So you see, our life is really interlinked between, rocks from the heaven. It was sort of insoluble problem to solve the origin of life. But if we do it in a sort of hierarchical fashion, like a system theory, then probably we can grasp it. For example, the cosmic stage, it has been done wonderfully by NASA. And for the last 30 years, the chemists, they have unraveled the possible stage to form, how the simple chemicals, they combine together to form, complex chemicals. But these two missing chapters are, one is the geologic stage. Because mind you, we have to remember that life formed in the beginning of our planet. So we have to know the geology. That has been neglected. And also the major thing is how the chemicals, complex molecules, turn into a sort of cell, living thing, entity. So these two are the missing chapters, but on the other hand, the other two chapters are very well known. So basically, I'm trying to put these, two missing chapters to make a complete narrative. So basically, there are two stages. Once you accept that these building blocks of life, they came from space, and in our planet, they're synthesized, they're joined together, then it becomes much more, meaningful and manageable questions, okay? So these are the two stages of, origin of life. One is the exogenous delivery, that means delivered by the meteorites. The other is actually our planet, Mother Earth was the best cook. This is where the life was brewed, cooked. Okay? Now look at the early Earth. As I said, the Hadean period, it was really devastating. Day and night our planet was bombarded by meteorite. And this is how the moon actually formed. There was a planet which crashed on our planet called Theia. It probably went into the interior. This is why our planet has a iron core. And all the ejecta, they are sort of, they are thrown away, they are coalesced, they form the moon. So you see, impact cratering is the most important geologic process in the early history of our planet. And look at our planet. In the Hadean time, it was just like a molten globe. No life could exist. And then suddenly. So this is how. If you look at moon, if you look at Mercury, the only geological feature you see, thousands of craters. Our planet would exactly look like this. Why we don't see it? Again, we have this plate tectonics. All the surface has been recycled. But that gives a sort of testimony. But these two, Moon and Mercury, they became dead after the impact. There is no geologic activity. But our planet is all the time evolving. Now, so the very first thing is, all this important building block of life, think our Lego block. You buy the Lego block, then you sort of join together, you can make your own castle, you can make your own car, you can make your own Camarasaurus. It's exactly like this. These building blocks of life came delivered by this meteorite. How do you know? Look at this. There's a very famous meteorite which has been studied intensively, which fell in Australia, Murchison meteorite. And this particular asteroid, carbonaceous asteroid, they are extremely rich in organic compounds. Okay? And through this Murchison meteorite, I'll show you again, almost all of the important ingredients of life have been isolated. You don't have to do it in home, in our planet. It's already there in this space. Similarly, if you look at the comets, they have the same kind of, huge array of biomolecules by which you can synthesize. So basically, you have seen box that, these are the spare parts, like, your children's bike, you simply assemble it. So all these intact ingredients came from space, and we know that in the initial stage, day and night our planet was pounded by meteorites. So they came from space. Now the beauty of our planet is we have the right environment where this could be joined, could be linked, can be cooked. And also the European agency, they are really studying this, comet 667P, and what they found very fascinating, they found all kinds of organic compounds. And also, we always thought, scientists always thought, that the source of water, they came from comets, because comet is really nothing but a huge piece of ice. Whenever it crashed, it really delivered water. So whenever you drink water, this is a really cosmic water you are drinking. But what they found because of this, 2 isotope ratio of, hydrogen, they found that actually it is not from comet, rather than asteroid, all the water came. As I said, this Murchison meteorite, and similarly from Antarctica, NASA has collected, hundreds of this carbonaceous chondrite. There's sort of huge, source of this organic compound they have analyzed. But if you want to build the important, components of life, you can get it either from asteroid or from comets. Okay? In fact, all the nucleotide base, if you want to make RNA, they have been detected here. The outer membrane of a cell, which is the most diagnostic feature of life. Without membrane, there is no life. They have been found in Murchison meteorite. When you powdered it and put it in water, the bubbles come. These are nothing but the lipid membranes. So space actually created. Okay? Interestingly, life really formed at a very narrow window of time. You know, by 4 billion years ago, our planet became tranquil, became, you know, sort of cool. There's oceans, the crust has been formed, and just ideal for, you know, formation of life. And if you look at some of the oldest rock, like in Greenland, you know, these are the graphite, and their composition suggests that they may be the very earliest form of life. So think about all these ingredients came and they need a space where they could be cooked, they could be interlocked, you know. Now, here I am proposing that, you know, the oldest sedimentary rocks, these are called greenstone belts, and they are the oldest form of life have been found. We believe that these are the actual craters. Most of the craters are gone. All the old craters, you know, in our planet, they are gone, but they are still preserved in only 3 places in the world. Just to give you some idea how the Archean Earth looked like. Entirely different. You will not be able to see any continent. Few islands here and there. They actually form the core of the continent. Okay? So it's mainly watery planet. 95% of the surface was covered by ocean. This is how it looked like. And this particular mineral really suggests that it was a watery planet, you know, by 4 billion years ago. So there's a lots of controversy going on. Where did life form? What is the geologic site? The most popular is hydrothermal vent. Okay? If you go down in the ocean floor, you can see, for example, if you go, you know, along the Atlantic, you'll see how the plates are separating. There's a rifting, and there's a volcano is coming out. So think about dark, pitch, hot. Nobody realized that life could be there. And in 1970s, when the submersible, you know, went there at the bottom of the oceans, they're surprised to find oases of life, entirely new kind of life. Think about the temperature is 400 degrees centigrade. And it is not powered by solar. It's not, you know, these are entirely powered by chemicals, by the magma. It's a heat-loving bacteria, you know. That's a food chain called thermophiles. So this is the most popular theory that, you know, life really originated in the hydrothermal vent. But there is one problem. You know, when you cook, you need a small pot. So the ingredients could be concentrated. You churn it, exactly the same thing happens. If you have a wide ocean, then all the molecules which came from space, you cannot concentrate. They'll be diluted. You need a sort of sequestered basin where these, you know, complex molecules, they can, you know, they can be joined together. Okay, so this, you know, I don't think this could be the right place. But look at, we can go back, how our planet would look like. It would be almost like surface of the moon, except all the craters would be covered by water. In other words, crater basin would be the ideal place for, you know, formation of life. Okay? And at the center of the crater, you see how the hydrothermal vent, you know, created. Okay? And look at here, crater has a sort of very high rim. Sometimes it could be 4 or 5 miles high. So it cannot go anywhere. You know, the water and everything you are cooking, it would be right there. You need that sequestered basin. If it is open ocean, it's impossible. You cannot create life. Then look at this, where NASA is looking for life. Exactly in the crater basin. This is that crater called Gale crater. This is where, Curiosity rover is really getting all the samples. How it would look like? Exactly like that. So this is how a crater lake would look like. Inside, you'll find this, this huge central peak, the lava is coming out, and this would be the ideal site for formation of life. And Mars has this analogy. You see, we lost all these ingredients. We lost all these features because our whole, old crust has been recycled. But there are 3 places on Earth. One is Greenland, one is South Africa, one is Australia, where the oldest sedimentary rocks have been found, and also where the oldest life has been found. These are very simple bacteria. But most of the recent work suggests that they are the actual crater basins. So some of the crater basins might have been, shaped. So in other words, if we study these 3 areas where the oldest life has been found, they may actually indicate that, these are the site where life has been found. And the crater basin has sort of typical structure, this kind of thing, and which really suggests that the greens, these are called the greenstone belt. These are actually the old crater basin. So this is how a crater basin would look like, So again, you can see the lava is coming out, and it has a very high rim, so it's sort of sequestered rim. And on the top, you'll see all these vesicles, all these membranes. Mind you, membranes came intact from space. If you just take any chondrite, any meteorite, okay? If you just crush this asteroid, carbonaceous asteroid, put it in water, you'll see these bubbles, these vesicles, the membranes. So membrane creation, which is the outer, casing of cell, is the most easy thing because it came almost intact from space. So this is how it would look like. The whole surface would be full of like a sort of, oil spill, full of this, membrane. And inside, mind you, all this gas are also coming from this, carbon dioxide, H2S, plus all the space molecules are there. So there's a big, cooking is there. There's a convection current. So all these chemicals, they're mixed and matched and, linked. And these are ideal crucible, for the synthesis of life. And if you look some of the fossils, these are most likely from the rocks now. Scientists think they formed in a sort of typical, hydrothermal vent. These are the oldest life, about 3.5 billion years old. These are the bacteria, very similar to this heat-loving bacteria if you go to, say, Yellowstone National Park. In fact, you should visit Yellowstone National Park. This is almost like a sort of, Garden of Eden. You can see life is forming. Okay? But these are the new kind of life. These are the thermophiles. They can survive a 400 degrees centigrade. Okay? New kind of life. They are not powered by sunlight. They are powered by the heat. And this must be the oldest kind of life. Just to give, we're talking about life. What is life? If you ask any biologist, they cannot define. In fact, this is a simple and probably the most complex question. What is life? But we know life has some attributes. We can define from their attributes. And if you compare life with a computer, probably we'll understand the functions. Okay? So life has 3 major components. One is, of course, the outer casing. That is the cell membrane. It's just like this outer casing. It holds these important components. And inside, we have proteins, which may be compared with the hardware of a computer, and these nucleic acids, DNA, RNA, which may be the software. And how do they interact? Probably this genetic code, which may be the operating systems. And that way, we can manage what is the function of life, what is the important components of life. Okay, it's almost like a computer. Much better, much difficult, of course. Now, this gentleman, David Dimmer, a good friend of mine, he really did some pioneer work. What he did, this is again the same Murchison meteorite. He powdered it, put it in water, shaked it, and guess what? He created the lipid membranes, the outer membranes of a cell. Then in the beaker, he put some DNA, RNA, a little bit of polypeptide, and they actually go inside and they started reacting. So you see the very first stage of forming a life, creating a life, you can see this. This part is not difficult because lipid membrane came intact from space. We have to do the other two, which are much more difficult. How to create DNA, RNA, how to create protein. Again, protein may not be difficult. I'll show you why. So this is how, cell membrane looks very simple. It's a very complex thing. Okay? One side of this, this fat, it's like a soap bubble. One side, they sort of hate water. The other, they love water. And this is how they enclose. And this is inside, you'll find these, proteins and, nucleic acid. So, second stage, third, so we talked about cosmic stage. We talked about geologic stage. Third stage is the chemical stage, as I said, which has been extensively worked out. Here, two important things happens. This is the signature of our life. In fact, if NASA scientists discovered a life on Mars, the very first thing they will do to check whether the Martian life is different from us. How? Look at here. There is a selection of chiral molecules, and all the life we see today, whether it's a bacteria, whether it's a cow, whether it's a grass, whether it's a human, we have left-handed amino acids in protein and right-handed sugars in nucleic acid. Okay? So two things happen in the chemical stage. One is that chiral molecules were selected. The other is this, polymerization. That means, with these bricks you can make a house. Okay, so these simple monomers, they're joined together, linked together, and form protein as well as nucleic acid. Now, just to give you some idea about chiral, it is so fascinating. Look at our two hands, left hand, right hand. They're just mirror image. But their property in chemicals, they're entirely different. When you have a headache, you take ibuprofen, and the pharmaceutical companies, they really selected left-handed. That is a much more potent than the right-handed molecules, although the same chemical compositions. This thalidomide disaster, it's because of this, they could not select the chiral molecules. So pharmaceutical companies routinely, because when you produce any chemicals in the laboratory, there will be 50-50 chance. There will be 50% right-handed molecules, 50% left-handed molecules. And then you have to separate it. In nature also, for example, if you take these crystals, calcite crystals, if you put it, they can really select these chiral molecules. Because mind you, all life we see today, we have left-handed amino acids and the right-handed sugar. So how did that selection took place? Okay? And that's the signature. So if they find life on Mars, the very first thing they will do to check this chirality. If they can show that they have this left-handed sugar and right-handed amino acids in the protein, then they know that life on Earth and life on Mars, they have different origin. Okay? But all life we see, this is our birthmark. This is the sort of signature. Now, how these monomers join together? Again, these minerals, look at here. These are the mineral substrate, okay? These are the clay, pyrite. And if you look under a microscope, these minerals, they're amazing. They have all these holes and everything by which simple thing can be linked together. They can turn into polymer. Okay? So the amino acids you create, they can really turn into sort of very nice protein, or this nucleotide you created, they can turn into sort of very nice in a clay substrate. Okay? So this is how the monomer turn into a sort of polymer. Okay? They simply join together and they form a sort of complex molecules. Same with RNA, you can see that these 4 bases and the sugar and phosphate backbone, they simply join together. So again, in this hydrothermal vent, we have the right kind of environment. People have done lots of experiment with the mineral substrate and how do they polymerize. So there is a great deal of controversy. I will not go into the detail which came first. Is it the RNA, the protein, or it's a membrane? You know, from David Demar's work, it's almost sure that membrane came first because it's present already in the meteorite. Okay, you don't have to do it. So the next question is between RNA and protein. You know, this is a very hot subject. Which came first? RNA or protein? You know, now in lab, you can make protein very easily. Actually, Miller did it almost. And nature has, this, you know, if it is the easiest way, then probably that would happen. In other words, protein should come first. But the problem is, you know, it's sort of chicken and egg problem. RNA cannot, you know, RNA has the power of, you know, replicating, okay? But it cannot do without this protein enzyme, and proteins cannot form without RNA. So which came first? You know, I think this is mute. This is sort of, you know, this is not the right questions. Because it's almost like, let me give you a simple example. You know, these high school students, think about, there are two students, they're supposed to play a duet, you know, violin and piano. They're practicing. The violinist is sort of a little bully type guy. He told the pianist, look, you know, I'm a great musician. I can play violin and I can play a little bit of piano. So you don't need it. You know, I don't need you. But the pianist said, look, if you play your part, if I play my part, then maybe we can make a very good duet. So exactly this controversy is just like that. You know, there are few RNAs which can behave like protein. So this big theory that RNA world, that is, RNA has that, you know, it's a versatile molecule. It can really replicate. It can function as a catalyst. So it came first. But look at nature. Protein is much easier to synthesize. It's a very stable. RNA just breaks down. RNA cannot stay without protein cell. So this you know, chicken and egg problem is not a problem if both actually appeared at the same time, like the violinist and piano, if they play together. And incidentally, after that, when the teacher comes, teacher said, okay, play, you have to correct here and there. So the teacher is the DNA, okay? So if we accept the synchronous origin, then it makes much simpler. And one of the most important support in recent times is that, you know, within the cell, you know, cell is so complicated, you know, much more complex than the Boeing factory. A simple bacterial cell. And the command, the order is just precise. So this is one of the machines, you know, throughout the cell called, you know, a ribosome. These are the protein factory. RNA tells how to make protein, and exactly following the code, you know, they make the protein. Recently, they have studied how this, you know, ribosome forms, and it really needs both RNA and protein. In other words, you know, they are present from the beginning. They occurred side by side. And the biologic stage, this is one of the things I'm working on. As I said, you know, cosmic stage and this, you know, chemical stage have been worked out very detailed. I'm trying to fill up the other two chapters, that is the geologic stage and biologic stage. One of the important things in evolution is really symbiosis. All over, you know. Darwin really emphasized on competition, but cooperation is also another very important part. Okay? Look at the way, you know, corals and algae, look at lichens, you know, which is really fungi and algae, look at the birds, how do they pollinate, look at here, even in our colon, we harbor billions of bacteria. We all have E. coli. Do you know what is the function of E. coli? We provide them shelter, dark chamber. In return, E. coli gives us vitamin K. It's sort of mutual. You know, you help me, I'll help you. And that's rampant in nature. If that is the case, in fact, This Lynn Margulis, I invited her at Tech. She gave a sort of series of talk here, but she was the proponent of this important biological principle called endosymbiosis. You can create a brand new life. Can you imagine? So what she suggested that few bacteria, they live together, and instead of eating each other, they live together. So if you look at any eukaryotes, you will find the two important components. One is the mitochondrion, which is really nothing but a respiratory bacteria. The other is the chloroplast, which is nothing but photosynthetic bacteria. And these endo means within the cell. And this is how animals and fungi, they go to one branch, whereas these plants they go to another. So this origin of eukaryotes simply by symbiosis, probably the most important contribution in evolutionary biology since Darwin. Darwin never thought that such a huge domain could be created simply by living together. And mind you, we are all eukaryotes. This is how the sex was invented. That gives a sort of, in every generation there is the variation. Before that, life was just monotonous. So this is a remarkable thing happened about, 2.5 billion years ago. So Lynn Margulis used her theory, endosymbiosis, in a bacterial level. I'll do the same thing in a molecular level. So think about, this is that, the crater basins. So in one part, you will get, lots of this, very simple polypeptide or this, protein. And in another side, you will find this, very simple polynucleotide or, RNA. And this, think about, there is sort of churning motions. And this membrane, they will simply, enclose just randomly. There are so many experiments, millions and millions. Okay. Eventually, think about, these are rich in protein, these are rich in RNA, they'll simply fuse together. Once they're within the membrane, they'll force to communicate. It's almost like, two people are not talking, put them in a room. And that communications, okay? So this is for the first time, you cannot do it in open space. You have to have that kind of closed chamber. Once you do these things, then you will see that series of, symbiotic relation took place, and this is how probably the very first cell forms, and they started division. That's the definition of life, that life can replicate. Okay? And here you will see more details. I will not go into these things, but basically these are the two substrates. In one, they are rich in protein, the other, rich in RNA, and they are sort of joining it together. Eventually, all the stages of, life you can create simply by symbiosis, and finally this, cell division took place. And in fact, here you can see how the ribosome is created. And this is how these two software, developed really, that is transcription and translations. So cell division is really the most important thing. That is the definition of life. Okay. Now the question is, are there any relict, or these are all gone, in the midst of time? Now today, if you look at and around us, there are two things which are really not life. They're in a twilight zone between living and non-living, like virus. If you put a virus in a bottle, it will be just like a grain of sand. But if a virus finds, host cell, then it will multiply. So what is this virus? Is it okay? Because it is not alive, it doesn't have this membrane. This is how we define life. Life should have a membrane. It should have RNA, DNA. It should have protein. Virus doesn't have all these things. Similarly, there is another thing which is also equally thread. That's called prion. It's a piece of protein. Again, it's really in the twilight zone. We know that mad cow disease really formed. Are the evolutionary relics? Are they sort of left out before the first cell was formed? Recent molecular biology suggests yes, they are older than the very first cell. And if that is the case, then if we put them together, if perhaps we can create, a sort of very fast synthetic life. Now this gentleman Venter, he really did something like that. Similarly, we need a sort of really very complex technology like Venter, put this virus and prion together in a sort of cell membrane and see whether we can create the very first cell. If that is the thing, then we can confirm how life might have been formed. So I think that's all in a nutshell. It's a big story, but thank you for coming.
Thank you. Really great. Did you take some questions?
Sure.
Professor Chatterjee is available for some questions now. I assume there are probably many. The floor is open.
Yes.
Are all the planets in the solar system about the same age?
Solar system, yes.
And if so, why are they so different?
Size, distance from the sun, but the age is same, And the best way to really determine the age, all the meteorites, all the asteroids, they show the same age. So there the asteroids really come from the asteroid belt, which is probably failed planet.
Have they always been in the same order, or have they changed orders?
So far we know, the order is there from the beginning.
Because they say Saturn has changed its order.
Yes, Saturn changed, of course, Pluto sort of very oblique, but they found another planet 10. Yes?
Your Lego analogy, I think you can get into some trouble with that.
Which one?
Legos don't assemble themselves.
No.
And-
But you assemble, so that's the mother earth did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, some alternative views might have something else doing the assembling.
Sure. And Lego, just to give, because the kids all the time play, but the assembly was done within this, vent. And you see, there's just like you cook. When you cook, why it is cooked? Because of the convection current, and the hot part at the bottom, top part in the cold, and so there is that convection current. This is how they are mixed and matched. And so hydrothermal vent is sort of very, very good analogy. It's almost like we see in the kitchen, and they are the oldest ecosystem. All over the oceans you will find, but this is a very specialized one that is within the crater, and that was so common in the early history of our planet. Any other questions?
So you said that for the in life, microbial or human life, anything. So it's L, but some of them, some bacteria use the D-alanine to make their cell. So what do you think the purpose of using D-alanine instead of amino acids in some case?
That would, it could be some new kind of life. If you just change the chirality,
Bacteria are pretty old.
Come here, I couldn't hear you.
For the bacteria, why would they change from L to D that old? And we use L-alanine, all these, for...
Nobody knows, why this change. Probably this is how, they interact. Okay, you have to have, left-handed molecules which can interact with the right-handed molecules. But this is one of the enigma. Nobody really knows. But the fact remains, it is true. So it must have started very early. You will never find any life which have a set of right-handed amino acids or left-handed sugar.
I have another question. So you said that RNA is unstable. We know that it's unstable because of the enzyme and RNAs and these things. But at this point of time, there won't be any RNAs because RNAs is enzyme, it's a protein. So RNAs cannot form before the RNA itself, right? Kind of.
Right. The problem with RNA is it's a very fragile molecule. It breaks down. Mind you, DNA, protein, everything has been found in fossil forms, never RNA. RNA has never been detected. So to keep RNA, you have to be enclosed. This is why the membrane first is sort of much more appealing. It has to be protected from the environment. Otherwise, it will simply break down.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned with respect to Europa that it seems to have a kind of tenuous oxygen atmosphere. Now that's a sign of possible life, but are there other things that could give rise to that? I mean, are there other hypotheses?
So far, no.
No?
No. That's why it's so exciting for NASA.
Uh-huh.
Okay. In fact, you may remember, maybe 20 years back, they wanted to know whether there is any life. The only thing they did, they sent a robot, they analyzed it, and they really wanted to check whether there is any oxygen. They could not find it. And this is how they concluded that there is no life. But with this new technology, probably they'll be able to collect some rocks from the crater, maybe showing either the living or fossil forms.
Well, that is very exciting.
Yeah. I think this is a very exciting time, really, especially for the younger people. Yes.
Somewhere along the line, I understood that most of the oxygen in water
Yeah.
comes from volcanoes. And now how do you put those two together with comets?
That was the old idea that, all this by degassing. Sure, volcano may contribute something. But using this isotope ratio, they really pinpointed that if you really look this deuterium versus, ordinary hydrogen ratio, they just match with, asteroid. So there is no doubt that it came from, asteroid. Yes?
Where did the asteroids come from?
Here, asteroids, they are all over this, okay? As far as we're thinking about our solar system, if you look at the rocky planet, the inner planet, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and then beyond that, these are all the gaseous planet or Jovian planet. In between, there are thousands and thousands of asteroid belt. They're sort of moving around sun. Chances are it was one time a planet, like the Theia, which crashed on Earth. So that was another failed planet, which sort of broken down, and they are in the form of asteroid.
But it had a lot of chemical stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we know that what happened to dinosaurs. Yes, they have. That's the surprising thing. People always thought that it's a sort of inorganic world. That is not true. All kinds of organic, molecules you'll find in space. And that's so surprising, that's so new. And again, without NASA, we'd know these things.
So,
Yeah.
So do you think that viruses showed up before the bacteria or the other way around? That viruses showed up before the bacteria or after the bacteria?
Before?
Before or after the bacteria?
Yeah, which one?
Other viruses.
Oh, before. These are all before, Once the life form, then, we still do not know, but they'll be very similar to thermophiles, looks like, from molecular phylogeny. But yeah, these are, whatever I just talked, mainly just before the life formed. Once it started to replicate, started to divide, then you call it life. So our goal is, how life could be formed by the cosmic, geologic, and chemical process. Then once it started dividing, you enter into the biologic system. Then the Darwinian evolution will take place. Okay?
Well, thank you.
I think,
Really an exciting talk. Oh, do we have another question?
yeah.
So, in our, to our understanding, carbon is the best form of life, and you mentioned how silica can also.
Right, exactly. That's why, Titan, NASA is thinking, because if there is any life, there are lots of science fiction about, silicon-based life, okay? It's a possibility. Carbon and silicon very, similar, same kind of, 4 valence and everything. But if there is any silicon-based life, maybe Titan is the place. Because, whatever we know about life, this is based on our experience on our planet. Who knows? We know that, the life we see, it needs water, it is carbon-based, but who knows?
So what are the similarities between carbon and silica?
There are lots, but silica doesn't function well with water. Okay.
Do they speculate what kind of life it would be, silicon-based?
Who knows? It would be tough, no doubt. Silica, carbon is a very soft, other than diamond, but silicon-based life would be, very strong,
Yeah,
tough.
plenty here, so.
Like today, in the oceans, there are some, full of silicon-based,
Yeah.
they secrete silica. If not, I think that's, thank you so much for coming, this time.